Hey, this is the franchise Shane Douglas in the world-famous ECW Arena, the building I made famous. And you're watching That Way Cool Wrestling Show. You want to find it out? This is the place to find it out.
Hey everybody, welcome to That Way Cool Wrestling Show. My name is Danny J, along with Charles Gemini Gregory, the Grand Onslaught Jackson, and Mad Mark Lindsay. We welcome you to another edition of the great show known as That Way Cool Wrestling Show. You can join us on Facebook at That Way Cool Wrestling Show or on the website at thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com. We got a really cool show that we're going to check out for you today. If you've ever watched wrestling in general, and then over the years thought it would have been great if this happened, or it would have been great if that happened, this is what we're going to talk about today, a fantasy promotion. We're going to go through and say, as a promoter, I would have done this, I would have done that, I would have done this differently, and just see where it leads us, and just kind of check out kind of the things that may not have happened, but maybe should have happened, in our minds at least. Mark, let me start off with you.
Sure.
Give us some kind of insight as to something that you would have done. Give us like an error. It doesn't have to necessarily be a time frame. It could be anybody from anywhere. But put something together that you would say that I really would have loved to have seen this.
Okay. Me personally, I got hooked by McMahon's WrestleMania 1, seeing Mr. T wrestle Orndorff and Piper with Hulk Hogan. And at the end of the match, Orndorff gets left behind and becomes a babyface. So I grew up as a sympathetic fan. He was the first wrestler I ever liked was Paul Orndorff. So much so that the following year when he turned on Hogan, it was the first time that I begged and my dad finally succumbed to taking me to a wrestling card. Was at the Spectrum, it was Hogan and Orndorff for the title. So that was a money feud. It really made them, or made Paul Orndorff a household name.
Yeah.
So my favorite era of WWF was that time. I'd say 86 to 90. And then the NWA, right around that time, I started watching the Crockett Promotions, the Worldwide Wrestling. So if I had a fantasy book, Orndorff came out of that feud with Hogan in early 87, was kind of held off to the side just in case Andre couldn't go. I know that's a story that makes the rounds a lot on the internet, and I am a smart mark, that if Andre wasn't physically able to go at WrestleMania 3, they were going to insert Orndorff in that main event as like a blow-off of the feud.
Right.
But when Andre gave the okay that he was going to put over Hogan and he was okay to wrestle, Orndorff kind of stayed in the background and took several months off. What I would have done is I would have immediately hopped to Jim Crockett Promotions NWA and inserted Paul Orndorff in the Ronnie Garvin. You had mentioned Ronnie Garvin several episodes ago. Charles says that he's on your wish list, your Christmas card list this year. Ron Garvin was basically a transitional champion.
Yes.
He won the title so Flair could get his fifth and get closer to that hardly erased record of the NWA title. I would have taken a red hot, fresh off of a Hulk Hogan feud, Paul Orndorff, had him beat Flair, and then had Flair beat Orndorff.
Make him
Make him the transitional champion. A little bit more believable. He was a household name.
Right.
And not saying that Ronnie Garvin didn't deserve it, but I think Orndorff would have been, in that fantasy scenario, would have made a great transitional champion.
Right.
Carrying that big gold belt around.
Sure.
And then, of course, he loses the Flair, and maybe you start having I won the big match, and I never got my rematch, and you have him turn back to a heel. Orndorff was always better as a heel. And I would have put him in a group like Al Perez, Larry Zbyszko with Gary Hart.
Yes.
Have him run in 88, 89 NWA, and just, he's my favorite wrestler, so of course I'm going to say give him the championship. But I think he would have made a great transitional champion. I'm not sure he would have made a great champion long term, but
Right.
That's my fantasy booking, would have been Paul Orndorff as transitional NWA champion. And before we go to anybody else, I'm going to fast forward a few more years. When Nitro first came out in '95, Orndorff was one of the older veterans, not really a main event at the time. His time had come and gone. But he helped put over the Four Horsemen version of Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, Flair, and Anderson, where they pile drove Orndorff, a bit of, life imitating art, irony, thank you,
Yeah.
where they pile drove Orndorff on this metal floor, the concrete floor, breaking his neck, and then Orndorff never wrestled for several years after that.
Yeah.
So I would have put Orndorff in the Horsemen. I mean, you had Anderson, you had Flair. I'm not saying that Pillman or Benoit didn't deserve the opportunity. They were the younger talent trying to get over. But I would have probably put an established Orndorff in there, and then maybe later on down the road have a Benoit or Pillman turn and kick Orndorff out. You know, maybe had Orndorff in that little brief run as a Horseman. I think he would have fit perfectly. But that's just, again, that's me with my favorite wrestler of all time and what I would have done differently if I could have.
Well, you say something good there, because like, once again, I think the Horsemen were not an avenue, and even though they did it this way anyway, they were not an avenue to put over new talent. They really should have always just been the established VIP section, whether it sounds bad or not to the young talent. I mean, unfortunately, that is what that is. There are other factions that can be started for younger talent, but the Horsemen are the Horsemen, and there's only so many, and we talked about this in previous episodes, there are only so many people that can go into that faction. And an established guy is something like that. We mentioned Kurt Hennig. When he was in there, it was written really horribly to get him out of it so quick.
Yeah.
But he was a fantastic Horseman material. Orndorff, I agree with you. Orndorff would have made a great Horseman. He came off. He was himself. He was Paul Orndorff.
With arrogant.
He was arrogant. He wasn't some young guy and he wasn't somebody branded. You know what I mean? So no, that's a great booking, something like that, and it's something that unfortunately we didn't get to see. And unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of that today. It's going to be stuff much like that we never saw, but we would have liked to have. And this is all conjecture and it's all opinion, based on what our likes are and what our beliefs are based on what we watched. So I mean, if you guys out there have anything you're thinking of along these lines, drop it on the Facebook page. Give us a comment. Say, hey, I saw the show and I would have liked to have seen this. I would like to have seen that. Or go on the website and check it out as well. We have a contact us form. You can do that. We always want to hear from our fans out there. And I'm going to go to Charles this time. And what do you got? What do you
I
got?
think what I would have done different than any booking. I'm going to go with the whole Sting Triple H thing for WrestleMania.
Okay.
I would have rather seen Shawn Michaels versus Sting.
Interesting. Okay.
The reason being, Shawn Michaels and Sting at their time were both here. Sting's a little older than him. Shawn Michaels is older than you think he is, but he's a little older. I would have rather went with that. I understand that Triple H is the cornerstone of the company. He's supposed to be, but no matter what you say,
Right.
Triple H is Triple H. All you gotta do is hear Shawn Michaels' music and everyone goes crazy.
Yeah.
He's still the man. He's still in pretty good shape. And I think that would have been a better thing. And I would have never had him wrestle like the Seth Rollins thing they did, which I never agree with. The guy's 28 and he's 56, 54.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to go that whole WrestleMania thing, if I was the booker, it'd have been Shawn Michaels versus Sting. Because too much Triple H, even now, is just too much. When you're at that certain age, it's time to fade out. Step back. You don't have to when your father-in-law owns everything. But there is a point where you have to know just to step back. You're done. Fill in. Don't try to be. You got all these other guys. But I think that would have been an even greater match. I mean, that was a great match when the NWO came out and Evolution, that whole thing. I ain't gonna lie, I marked out a little bit. I was like, damn.
I gotta disagree.
I'd have liked to put this thing, and like
When
I
the
said,
I agree with Dan.
NWO walked down there, they all needed larks that had the NWO symbol on it, so they can get down to the ring quick enough. If I had to rely on 3 guys galloping down to the thing because they can't really walk right, that was the saddest thing I ever saw in my life.
Wrong.
And because DX actually looked a little bit better, okay. And here you go, the night before in the Hall of Fame, you got Sean Waltman, who was hanging out with the NWO because they were inducted, but now he's with DX the day after at WrestleMania, and him and Kevin Nash are going at it. There's a degree of saying, all right, it's entertainment and stuff like that, but now you completely insulted my intelligence to say, why would this happen right now?
Come on, at the Hall of Fame show, if you really believe Smart Mark. That these guys don't hang and drink together. Smart.
Of course.
Mark.
Oh,
I don't even care if you're a
what are you
regular
talking to
fan.
me for? I'm agreeing with you.
I'm just telling because I've seen you get excited when we talk about wrestlers, but we ain't gonna go there because you've been messing with me for a couple of days now. But that these guys don't know each other, you're on the road together.
Of course,
you know.
yeah.
But like you just said, I do remember that. But I hate his guts anyway. But that I still think that was one of the greatest things, just to have that happen. You know, you never thought you would ever see it, and it was actually
Well, you know
totally
what,
surprising me.
you got a good point with Shawn Michaels, because, I mean, Shawn Michaels and Sting personally have a relationship
Yes.
outside. They're very strong, devout Christians. And they work together in a religious capacity together. So they know each other, that type of thing. I would have liked to have seen Sting come out not trying to pose as the Great Buddha. I didn't understand that entrance part either.
I didn't get that either.
He had all those drums and stuff like that, and I thought Tong Po from Kickboxer was coming out. I didn't know what
The
was
only-
happening.
the only
But the only thing
issue
I
I
would say
had-
about the whole, I won't cut you off. I think that's one. I think he was in better shape at that time than Triple H was, because when he did that drop kick at his age, he was right in his chin.
Yep.
And sometimes you know
Sting
that's
can
it.
go.
You know sometimes you know your time is coming. You got to go with it and give it all you got. He actually outworked Triple H that day. You know, I'm just putting that out there. But
And I agree with everything you said. I think Shawn Michaels would have been great in that spot as well. What I would say, the only issue I had with what actually went down was that the NWO helped Sting. And
Yeah.
that was awkward to me.
That's because that's who they had.
Yeah,
That's
but
who they
they
had.
remember they were doing the WCW versus.
Of course they were.
Of
But
course.
if anybody who actually watched WCW, which a lot of people did, obviously,
Sting
they
was
know
a
that
thorn in
Sting
their
was
side.
against the
He was a
NWO.
thorn in their side.
But all of those groups together, every one of those guys were all the clique.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, Sting kind of excluded, but in WCW, Sting was really.
So what you could have
with
done
Kenny
differently
Ashton, Scott Hall.
was had the NWO and DX all come out, surround Sting, and then bring in DDP, bring in Booker T,
There you go.
bring in the Steiner brothers, and then you kind of have,
Work with what you had. Bring
No,
in DDP.
I'm sorry, I'm stealing your fantasy.
No, you could bring in the Steiner brothers. Remember,
Well, that's where, yeah, Scott's
Scott Steiner would beat up Hulk Hogan for real. And I understand, Scott. I understand. But go ahead.
But no, I think it was a great one. But Grant, how about you?
I got nothing.
Okay.
Really?
Let me tell you something.
He's happy the way everything fell.
To be honest with you, I enjoyed my life as a child coming up watching what I watched. A lot of things I didn't agree with, but it's cool
Okay.
because it helped shape me as a fan.
Right.
You have to deal with disappointment sometimes. Just like the guy in the white hat doesn't always win.
That's right.
Boo freaking who. You got your villains, you got your heroes. Everybody's hero is a villain to somebody else.
Right.
Enjoy it for what it is. So, you want me to comment on this? Very simple. Sit down, get your drink, get some popcorn, maybe a sandwich, a piece of pie, and watch the show.
So you pretty much
Enjoy
say
it for
that.
what it is. Because, to be honest with you, some of the stuff you're watching, you may not like, but it's going to be an incredible memory for somebody else.
So you say just get your boogie boogie on.
Pretty much.
All right.
There you go.
All right.
Now for me, slightly different.
All right. I
Here we
swear,
go.
Wait a minute.
I mean,
Mr. Cameraman, you might have to cut it off because if he says anything about Jimmy Garvin, I'm punching him in his face.
It's funny you should say that.
let me move my stuff off the table. We're going to need a replacement.
Back in the day,
Oh, y'all call me Mr.
roughly
Shaker, right?
85, 86, we got a young man, a talent, pretty much that era Sting, which was known as Magnum TA.
He wanted to say strapping. You do know.
I was strapping young buck,
Yes, he
very
did.
Tom Selleck looking. He was the United States heavyweight champion, and then he started a mini program with one gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, with Precious. At that time, Jimmy Garvin, up until the point of the Freebirds, going heavily into WCW, really wasn't holding any championships in NWA, in Jim Crockett Promotions. Although I thought he was a likable enough villain or heel to really see, to have one of those not necessarily maybe the TV title, but the US title, and back then the US title was a little bit more prestigious than the World TV title. But to have him go against someone like Magnum TA, and maybe like almost like a transitional champion, have him win the United States title, give him something to brag about more. One other reason to hate him, okay? Precious is spraying the hairspray. He's the United States heavyweight champion. David Crockett's over there yapping to him and getting all this stuff in his face. Let me tell you, Tony Schiavone, you know, how Jimmy Garvin used to do, and have the U.S. title, and then eventually drop it back to Magnum TA. But that would have been one of my big things. I think another one, and I talked about this slightly in another episode, was Ricky Morton. Ricky Morton, at one point when Robert Gibson wasn't around because of contractual agreements and stuff like that, they started to try and keep him in tag team wrestling. They put him with Nikita Koloff. Made no sense at all. Eventually, they put him with Tommy Rich, which gelled pretty well. And eventually, they did the York Foundation, etc. But the to make him be a singles wrestler and then maybe win the World Television title, I think he would have been a great World Television champion. He was still hot back then. He was still, it wasn't a teeny bopper era at that particular point, but you know, he was in the latter part of his fame, I would think, at that point.
You're talking mid to late 1990, if I recall. Arn Anderson was TV champion.
Yeah.
Anderson and Morton would have had a great feud.
No,
over
you
that
said
TV
fantastic.
title.
I think, didn't they run with the Morton Flair in that area for
That was like
a while?
86, 87.
Right.
I think that was
Yeah.
incredible too.
That was, I mean, granted, he's not going to drop the title to Ricky Morton.
Yeah, but he.
But Ricky,
It looked
but
good.
it looked really
It
good.
looked really good.
It looked really good. So it proved that Ricky Morton could do something other than tag team wrestling.
Yes.
And if they were insistent on breaking up the Rock and Roll Express, who are another, arguably one of the most famous tag teams from that era. You know, everybody loved, if you're in JCP, you loved Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express, those feuds. But Ricky Morton, like LeGrand said, hell of a worker. And a charismatic person, a person who could talk on the mic, you know, had that southern style, but he was like, woo! He was like, you know, he was there, he was a party, waiting
He had
to happen.
flair.
Yeah, he had flair. He had flair, for lack of a better term. That would have been great.
He had pizzazz.
But now, to do more on the fantasy side of the promoting part, like a booking type of scenario, two things. I would have liked to have taken the Killer Bees from the World Wrestling Federation, which unfortunately I don't think they used them the way they should have. They used them as a feud more than once, but never gave them their just desserts. I think together they were a great tag team. They looked great together. To bring them into JCP, have them feud with the Midnight Express for the United States tag titles, and then have them pull the mask switcheroo on Jimmy Cornette and have Jimmy Cornette bitching up and down to Jim Crockett Sr. and all these other, it was Jim Crockett Jr. rather, to, you know, I want an injunction on this and blah, 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 and this and the other thing, and because they used to do that a lot. They used to make people get suspended and they'd put a mask on and God forbid you couldn't tell that Dusty Rhodes wasn't the Midnight Rider.
Right, of course,
Or, you know, or somebody wasn't the Yellow Dog, you know, or whatever.
Brian Pillman and Barry Windham.
Barry Windham was the Yellow Dog, right. So, like, stuff like that would have been really cool. But the one I really, really thought would have been really, really neat, and think about the grittiness. If you remember back when you watched JCP, in comparison to the World Wrestling Federation, it was very, very bright versus very, very dingy, okay? It was very dark. Dark matte, everything was real, and they did that to kind of hide the crowds a little bit, obviously. Jim Crockett Promotions didn't have thousands and thousands of things, so the arena was a lot darker. So bring in a Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. Remember when they first came in and they were just in all in black and they had like just blue down or whatever? They didn't get into the whole pink thing. Bring them in, no Jimmy Hart. Bring them in, maybe you can have somebody else to manage them or whatever, but bring them in as
Paul Jones.
right, or whatever. Yeah, well, Paul Jones was a big guy back then, you know, manager. Bring them in as a heel tag team, win the world tag titles from maybe the Rock and Roll Express or whatever, and have them go back and forth. They could have easily done what the dynamic duo, Rude and Fernandez, did in that time era. Because remember, that was cut short because Rude got called to World Wrestling Federation. And they were great together. But to have the Hart Foundation in JCP, in that same role, that same time, was around the 25th anniversary of the tag titles, I think, or something like that, because remember they had those silver belts, silver anniversary belts.
Yeah.
You know, that would have been great to have the Hart Foundation as that dynamic duos thing and do whatever, because I guess you couldn't predict Rude leaving at that point, but it would have been a great thing, because they held the titles for a while. Rock and Roll didn't get it back for a long time, you know?
I mean, I think we're talking about our fantasies and this and that. We're talking a lot about the men, you know, the tag teams. I want to cut back real quick, go to the women. I would have loved to see Chyna in her prime versus Beth Phoenix.
Yeah.
Two powerhouses, you know?
Beth Phoenix is one of the ones that really was like, you were like, she was legit.
She was legit.
Yeah.
Chyna was legit.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they pumped her up with all that stuff, and you know, whenever they talk about her, they won't get rid of this. No, she was Attitude Era. Chyna was Chyna. She was wrestling men. She was kicking their asses. I don't care who she slept with or what she's doing. She was a fantastic worker. They loved her. And think about it, when she first started, she really sucked. She was just big. She progressed and worked at it. She worked. You know, that's one thing we always talk about wrestling, which really sucks. The personal aspect, you know, who's with who, and that, you know, gets you pushes, or
Yeah.
if you're dating someone, it just shouldn't be like that. I wish, you know, as a fantasy, I wish we could change that.
Right.
You know, that would be nice, you know, let the legitimate guys out there, just because you're, you know, banging John Cena or wherever, that you're, you know, no, it shouldn't be like that. It just shouldn't.
I'll even do one more for you. Beth Phoenix versus Chyna with special guest referee Nicole Bass.
Dude, Nicole Bass scared the shit out of me.
Now you're talking about it.
You can talk about anybody you want
to.
to. I ain't messing with her. She scares me.
Yes. And I think
She's
that's
a real nice lady.
He scares me too.
She's got locked up.
Doesn't
She
make
got
her
locked
evil.
up for
Yeah.
Steve.
Doesn't make her evil.
Yeah, but she's scary.
She's lovely. But you know, but yeah, there's a lot.
Oh, we can't go. I'm sorry. We won't take- She scares me.
She was something, but yeah, you have something there. And once again, you go back with the women, you know, there was a lot of women, and unfortunately, back then, the World Wrestling Federation really showcased the women where the NWA did not. And they
Look
had
at
women.
Medusa.
They
Look
had,
at Medusa versus
well,
Trish Stratus.
yeah.
That would have been, that would have been fantastic. If they were, you know, Medusa's old like us.
And if I'm gonna go old school, take Misty Blue. Remember Misty Blue?
Misty Blue
wow.
Sills, yeah.
Right? Misty Blue, and go against Rock and Robin. Okay? If you go back, now those were two that were matched up pretty well.
Wow. Misty Blue and
Rock and Robin, right?
Now,
Now,
Smart
Rock
Mark is the referee, huh?
and Smart Mark as the referee. Now, Rock and Robin
With a box
was,
of tissues and some Vaseline.
if I'm not mistaken, Rock and Robin was was related to Jake Roberts, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
Right.
Because
I think
Rock and
yeah.
Robin and Sam
He's right.
Houston
Right.
are related to
That's
Jake
right.
Roberts. So you already got a lineage of wrestling right there. Because Jake Roberts was doing great in World Class at the
Yes.
time, and then eventually the Fed. And then Misty Blue, you saw every, I don't know, 6 months on Saturday night at 6:05. But they unfortunately didn't showcase her well, but she was just one of the ones who was just like, hey, I'm here. And at the time, she was like the hot girl, you know. And when you look back, if you look at pictures of her, not that she wasn't attractive, but like, it was 1986, people. Just letting you know that, you know,
Yeah.
the feathered hair was
Yeah,
fine,
talk
wild.
about, I was in my prime. Shut your mouth. All right. 'Cause I was about to get out of high school. You know, don't even go there by 86.
86, if I was going to say, if wrestling was a fine wine, 86 would have been the year for professional wrestling.
Yeah.
I wasn't even
Uh,
in double digits yet. So.
Let me get some final thoughts on you, Charles.
I think all of us here, there's a lot of things we would love to see. I wish we could have a time machine and put this stuff together.
Thankfully,
It's
YouTube.
yeah, it's pretty much. I mean, like he said earlier, it's wrestling's that give and take thing. You can't give us everything at one time. You know, it has to keep going progression, you know, this and that. But yeah, there's a couple matches I think we talked about here I think would have been great. That's all, I mean, there's nothing else you can say.
Mark?
I'll throw one more quick one out there. At the end of their run in WWF,
You never
Tully
know what
Narn-
final thoughts are, do you? You just
Final
gotta
thoughts.
go
This is my
on
final
and
thoughts.
on.
Tully Narn
Yeah.
went back to the NWA.
You talk in
and
your sleep,
Tully,
don't you?
yes, I do.
Oh, all right.
My wife tells me all the time. Tully failed the drug test.
Yes.
And he was supposed to come back. They were supposed to reform the Horsemen. If I was Jim Hurd, I would have just ignored the drug test result.
A drug test. A drug test in wrestling.
Yes,
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah.
I would have just brought back Tully.
What precedent
Imagine-
are we setting?
Imagine the Horsemen in 89, 90, again, as Tully, Arn, Rick, and Barry would have been
Yes.
phenomenal. And no disrespect to Sid, but he was just the first of Paul Roma and Mongo McMichael.
We're
It's
still
just
talking
not-
about a drug test in wrestling.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
That's,
well, go
that's
ahead.
the real fantasy, isn't it?
All right.
And the only reason they saw that drug test was he tried to come back.
Yeah,
Forget about the time that he was there.
right. Yeah, they didn't care what
He
he
didn't
did
do
when he
that
was
one
there.
time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No offense to Tully Blanchard, because he's one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
But
He's doing well now.
yeah, he is.
He's
doing
on the
very
streaming
well.
circuit,
You know.
got his stuff together.
Look at the guy that has nothing to say. LeGrand, let me hear your final thoughts.
I got nothing to say about
He's
it.
sign language. He's doing sign language over here. He's sign guy.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Blanchard.
215-40. No, sorry.
I have nothing to say. I apologize for them. You know, everybody, anybody and everybody they have offended, I apologize for them.
Offended.
I apologize for him especially. Because, you know, it is what it is.
Hey, I'm sitting on my chair.
Wow. I wasn't even going to go there. I mean, I was all about
You're on a high
his feet dangling. No, his feet dangling. I think your toes is touching the ground over there.
My feet are
I'm
flat
getting
on
a
the
great
floor, baby.
workout. I'm just saying.
My feet are flat on the floor. I don't have to sit in the high
That nigga got the
chair.
shoes off. But go ahead.
But in all seriousness, you know, coming through the 70s, late 70s, 80s, and with all the many talented guys that came through, you could sit here for at least 6 hours coming together with
Say
different...
6 months.
No, I say 6 hours because eventually you'll just fry your own brain trying to come up with all the wonderful matches that you can come up with.
You know what?
One of the things I would like to have seen, because he really didn't get a lot of play, was Outback Jack. As much as nobody really liked Outback Jack and the Tie My Kangaroo Down thing, if you had hooked him in with the Sheep Herders and did like a couple different feuds with, like, let's say, some of the European teams, you would have had a really good...
Why don't you just say...
I'm glad you brought that
Hold on,
around,
hold
because
on,
you were talking
Mark.
about Back Jack
Hold
for a
on, smart
second
Mark.
there.
Why don't you go Colonel De Beers versus the Nation? It's domination.
Bring him back.
That would have been a good one to watch.
Really? Yeah, there you go.
That would have got...
Oh,
Excuse me. No, with Stan Hansen as his partner.
this guy's starting a war in Australia and New Zealand over there. Guys, this is what I deal with.
And you love every second.
And I love every second of it. It's wrestling and we love it. ThatWayCoolWrestlingShow.com. The Facebook is That Way Cool Wrestling Show. If you go to the website, please like our Facebook, but also subscribe to the YouTube channel. We want to see everybody viewing these shows. If you have anything you want to hear from us, if you want to do any comments, please make sure on Facebook or on the website, make sure you send us some comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Tell them to send us some ideas they want us to talk about.
Yeah, honestly, we want to hear what you want us to talk about here. Send us some ideas, and if it's something workable, we'll make it right on here, and we'll give you credit as well. We got a lot of stuff coming up.
Tell them to buy
with
the
show.
shirts.
We have shirts. We have shirts. If you want to buy a shirt, I'll sell you a
Buy
shirt.
my shirt.
Buy his shirt. He has it with him right now.
8x10 glossies?
We got a lot of booking information on the website. For Charles Gemini Gregory, the Grand Onslaught Jackson, and the madman himself, Mark Lindsay. My name is Danny J. Till next time, we'll see you at the night. Goodbye, everybody.
Peace.